Hello, and welcome to my speaker reel. My name is Selena, and my passion lies in empowering educators to create transformative classroom environments. Through speaking engagements and training sessions, I share practical strategies for building inclusive spaces where everyone thrives, from implementing structured support systems to amplifying student voices. I've selected these clips to demonstrate my experience supporting educators in developing intentional practices that strengthen classroom culture, enhance instruction, and build meaningful communities. Thank you for this opportunity to share my work. Hi, welcome to today's Solid 60 with Selena, your solid planner. Now, this week we are talking all about keys to building safer spaces. And like I said, we're going to talk a little later about safer versus safe spaces, but let's jump right in, right? And so equality, everybody gets it. Diversity, we're going to make sure that there are different types because people have different needs. And equity means that we're going to make sure that the different needs fit the needs of each individual person so you get exactly what you need. But the last two, acceptance is the understanding that we all wear different shoes. Look at that word. It is the understanding. That's where acceptance comes in. So if you stop at equity, it is not enough. Where is the understanding? And are you cultivating this idea of an understanding of these differences in your classroom? And there are different ways that you could approach that. And then after the understanding, belonging is wearing the shoes that you want without fear or judgment. So not only do we understand that everyone has different needs, but we also recognize that, some people are more comfortable in things that we might not have seen them in, right? And so, but we want them to understand that whatever shoe you want to wear, whatever shoe rocks and fits your style, you will not be judged. That is the safest feeling of all, knowing that you belong in that space. So my 3 tips is know the difference, know your role and impact on communicating these differences, and use it to inform your planning. Take up space. Take up space. Take up space. Those were the 3 words that came to me as I sat in the airplane on my way to JFK for what I call my annual visit the family trip. And I was sitting, writing, journaling ideas for what would later become my first blog entry. And as I was writing it, I told myself, Selena, wait a minute. Dark skin, black, plus size, and plus it's just extra, so I got extra credit, y'all. Come on, I love it. Queer woman of Caribbean and Hispanic descent was actually allowed to sit and occupy this first class seat. Come on. Now, I know some of you were like, it's really easy to take up space in first class. You're right, okay? But for whatever reason, as I sat in what was actually constructed and built to give its occupant more space and more room and more comfort, I found myself grabbing hold of my carry-on, shifting a little closer to the window, and doing everything I could do as to make my partner feel a little bit more comfortable. I even contemplated getting up to use the bathroom, okay? It's a 3.5-hour flight, and I was like, that's not gonna work. Why? Because my whole life, I felt as if I was not allowed to take up space. And when I did occupy a space, I felt like I had to occupy as little of it as possible to make everybody else feel okay. You know what? For me, belonging is twofold, right? Belonging looks like making space for people, making space for all kinds of people, for all kinds of opinions, even the opinions that do not mesh with the ones we might have ourselves. So that means making space for disagreements, Because at the end of the day, when you do that, you also then make space for conversation. And so belonging is about being very intentional to make sure that we make the space for people to be a part of the collective, even during the times where we might wish that they were not a part of the group and the collective. And then belonging, that twofold part, is making sure that when you step in, you're taking up the space and you are making sure that you're holding yourself accountable to say that no, that door opened for me, and so I'm supposed to be here and I belong here. We're going to do history in 30 seconds because I don't teach history, but let's see if I could impress our social studies teachers. 1956, a man named Blooms went ahead. He worked with a whole team, and they were trying to figure out how can we measure this thing called learning and thinking, right? And so he started to define the cognitive process, in a way where, as an educator, we can then measure where are our students at a certain point, right? And if we know where they are at a certain point and how they're processing that information, we also know, okay, what's the next point we need to get them to, so forth and so on. And so him and his team came up with these 6 levels, and it goes all the way from knowledge all the way up to evaluation. And some people say knowledge is the bottom level or the lowest level. And when it's graphed out like this or charted out, it is at the bottom. But I like to think of it not at the bottom like that's a bad thing, but at the bottom like that's the foundation. Can't do anything else if they don't know. All right. So like any other good thing in life, in 2001, somebody came along and they said, let's remix this thing. Let's change it up. They didn't do that much. And so if you're like me, when I was going to school, I learned it the old school Blooms, like knowledge, comprehension. And so when I started seeing the new words, I was like, what are you doing? Don't mess up a good thing. But all they did was they went from words that are static, knowledge, comprehension, application, to words that are actionable. All they did was change it into a verb. So they said instead of knowledge, we'll say that this column is now remember, because learning is an action, right? And so comprehension then becomes understand. Application becomes apply. So all they did was make that shift. So whether you're familiar with the old 1956 version or the revised 2000, we are all talking about the same thing, all right? Analysis became to analyze. The biggest change happened at the top 2. And so when you analyze, essentially you have to synthesize or put together information, right? You go to the doctor's office and they're going to piece together what you said with your temperature, with your blood work, in order to evaluate exactly what is happening in your body. And so they took away synthesis as like this extra step, and they moved down evaluate. Because they're like, when you analyze and evaluate, you are synthesizing information. And so once they moved it down, they had room for a 6th category, which is my favorite. The highest level of cognitive processing is to create. And so what they said is when students create their own original, whatever it is, they are using the highest form of thinking. So Allison Fallon, author, speaker, creative coach, wrote these words, and they really, really, really stuck out. She said, writing is not some elite activity reserved for the uniquely gifted. Writing is communication, self-discovery, creativity, spirituality, and self-expression. Writing is the essential tool we use to find and practice our sense of voice. A few words really jump out for me. Uniquely gifted. Another thing you're going to hear people, or you may, let me not make that assumption. You may hear someone say, well, I can't do it because I don't teach those GT kids. What? I don't do it because, my kids, they require a co-teacher and it just takes Writing isn't for a particular group, and it's not for the elite. It's not for the kids who are already mastering the content. Writing is for everybody. Yes. I love that word ownership stuck out. We heard her say it repeatedly as well. But I like the fact that you use that to even reflect and say, okay, students want this thing. They do. We see on social media how much they want to create. and how much attention they want and acknowledgement they want. So now it's just, so how do we kind of blend the world that they're used to creating in and blend it with the world that they're usually fighting against and what that looks like? Thank you for sharing. Your hand was going up before? The same thing? Okay.